recording. And thanks for that. And let me also share my screen. And I'm going to get this going as well. So as I said, this is part of a national or nationwide day of action. There are rallies happening all around the country. And in fact, there's an Indivisible East Bay rally that's happening after we close this evening. And I'm going to give you information so that you can connect to that later if you so choose. The hashtag for this and the name for this is Recess Can Wait, Our Democracy Can't. And that's the key push that key thing that we're pushing for, I guess I should say. Although we have a couple of other actions that are also critical, and we're going to be talking about those a little bit later in the evening. The reason that recess can wait and our democracy can't is that the Senate has to pass the For the People Act. And we've got something of an update on that. We'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes as well. Before we do that, I want to acknowledge that I think a lot of us may be wondering why we can't just be on vacation. It's August. We've been through an awful lot already this year, with COVID seeming like it was backing off and the vaccine seeming like it was going to open all the doors that it possibly could. Now that's a bit in question with the Delta variant. But also the Senate's still in session and we've got critical issues that are facing us that mean that perhaps even if we're on vacation, we need to carve out a little bit of time to keep engaging because things are moving ahead, whether we want them to right now or not. Specifically, we've got voting rights are an issue. And I've said this in communications before, you may have heard me say it. We can't win next year's elections right now, but it's entirely possible that in the next weeks or month or so that we could lose those elections. And the reason for that is that the GOP is working overtime right now. They are not on recess. They're out there trying to stifle people's ability to vote. And in fact, Republicans have introduced nearly 400 bills in 48 states to make voting not only difficult, it's not just about not being able to get a bottle of water when you're in line, or that the lines are longer, although those things are true as well. But they're basically weaponizing the big lie, Trump's big lie. If you think back to the last election in November, when Trump clearly in the few days after the election had lost, but he kept throwing everything he could at the wall to basically try to eke out a victory in the face of the fact that he'd actually lost. He came up with bogus theories. He enlisted people in those theories. He tried to get people to change vote totals. He ranted about it the whole time. And even though we were successful and he wasn't, I mean, it led up to a violent coup attempt on January 6th, of course. Basically, what was also happening was Republicans were looking at every point that failed in their effort to defraud us and to steal that election. And they're plugging those holes right now. So if there was somebody that they asked to overturn results and they didn't do it, they're trying to purge that person from the party and replace them with somebody who actually can do it. If there was a board of elections that stood in their way, they're trying to get them out of the way and say the legislature should be able to decide this instead. Essentially, what they're trying to do is not only make it harder for people to vote, make it easier for people to intimidate them, to keep them from voting, make it easier to challenge the results of votes, and make it easier to overturn the results of votes if all those other things fail to make them the victors. Essentially, what the Republicans are trying to do is make it so that they can't lose next year. And that battle's being fought right now. It's not being fought next year. It's not something that you can overcome with canvassing. Basically, what we need to see is that Senate Democrats have to protect voting rights legislatively. They have to pass the For the People Act, also known as Senate Bill 1, because supposedly it's supposed to be the Senate's #1 priority. And they have to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, because that will put back in protections that were stripped out by the Supreme Court in a few years back when they basically gutted the Voting Rights Act. It's been rightfully pointed out that even if they do these things, they're going to be taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, as you know, is stacked illicitly, really, with folks that Trump was able to slide in there after Mitch McConnell withheld the ability to appoint a justice from President Obama. And so the Senate's Democrats are also eventually going to have to commit to rebalancing the Supreme Court, because if they don't, we won't have the ability to actually have free and fair elections, which means that will be called a democracy, but will be a democracy in the style of Hungary or Belarus, where we're actually ruled by an authoritarian and white nationalist, in this case, Republican Party. Democrats have the power to do this. They can do it with a simple majority vote. They have 50 votes in the Senate. They have the tiebreaker in the vice president. In order to do that, they need to abolish the filibuster or carve a workaround out of the filibuster and pass the legislation. So it's important to note that there are no Republicans needed for this. There are no Republican votes. And in fact, Republicans don't have a veto unless Democrats continue to give it to them. The power is entirely in the Democrats' hands. They don't need any Republican votes. They would never get any Republican votes to stop Republicans from cheating in the next election. Republicans are not going to do that. In addition to all of this, they have to act soon, or it's going to be too late to implement the protections that the laws afford. Among them, protection that would say that states can't gerrymander for partisan gains. That's in the For the People Act. In time for the 2022 election, ideally would have meant by today or tomorrow, because the census results are going to be released on Thursday. And at that point, states will start figuring out their congressional districts and in the redistricting process. And in doing that, Republican states are going to try to gerrymander the heck out of it, so that even if Democrats win a huge amount of the popular vote, they'll still lose because you can carve district just so that you get a Republican majority. They've done this for years now in Ohio and Wisconsin, North Carolina, and they're set to do the same thing for the next 10 years. These bills really should have been passed by now. And the reason that they haven't been, as far as we can tell, is not only Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema kind of standing in the way, but Joe Biden not making this a priority. We had news going back a week or so ago that the Biden White House seemed to think that you could out-organize voting rights as long as you delivered a hefty infrastructure bill that made everybody love you. And we believe that that's not true. And in fact, that you can't out-organize gerrymandering. It's just not possible to do. You could turn out a lot of voters, but if the districts are carved up the right way, you're not going to win those districts. Those are going to be House districts that go to Republicans. And at a statewide level, if the legislature has the right to throw out the results that you came up with, as Trump was asking the Georgia Secretary of State to do, and he actually asked the Attorney General to do that too. Throw the results out, give me the results I want. Republicans have shown many times over that they're not only willing to do that, they're eager and happy to do that. So at this point, let me back it up a little bit and say where we are in the process. So Schumer at the end of June basically put the For the People Act up for a vote, and it was immediately filibustered by the Republicans. He did that kind of as a test to see if he could move it forward, knowing that the Republicans were going to block it. And in a way, as a demonstration to Democrats who have been wary of getting rid of the filibuster, in a way to test the waters with them so they could see what was going to happen. But since then, all of the focus has been on the twin infrastructure bills. We're going to talk about those in a few minutes. The focus has not been on the For the People Act. And a number of us across the country have been very upset and very concerned about that, because you could pass great legislation, but if you can't win elections, I mean, if it's literally impossible for you to win elections, um, you're screwed. I mean, that it's kind of the end of the story. So it's really critical that both of these acts get passed. The plan right now is for Schumer, maybe today, could possibly be going on now, could be tomorrow, to bring the For the People Act back up for a vote, expecting that it will be filibustered, and then to bring up two elements of that. One that would seek to undo the influence of dark money in politics, and another that's around gerrymandering, and to bring both of those up for a floor vote, expecting that those will be gerrymandered as well. But at that point, Schumer intends to let the Senate go on recess and reconvene them on September 13th. And what we've been told is that Schumer believes that he's got until November to actually get the For the People Act passed. We're quite concerned that states are going to be gerrymandering between now and then, and that it's going to be harder to challenge those gerrymanders in court, because the law that's supposed to keep them from happening won't have been in place when they were actually put in place. So that's the concern. Let me pause there and ask, does anybody have questions? Anybody wondering, how's this working, or why is it working that way, or have questions about any of the terms that I've been using, whether it's filibuster or reconciliation or anything else? So does this all make sense? And is anybody lost?
Does Schumer give any reasoning? I haven't read enough recently about this for waiting. Does he have something he's got up his sleeve, or it seems crazy?
I don't know that Schumer has said very much about it. He said earlier in the spring that this was a must-pass bill, and being the For the People Act, that it was a must-pass bill, and they weren't going to just let it go by the wayside. And they were going to do whatever it took to get it passed. So he said that, but he hasn't been acting like it. He brought it up for a vote and let it be filibustered in June. And, we should be clear that Manchin wasn't going to break a Republican filibuster. Sinema at that point wasn't going to break a Republican filibuster. But Schumer also didn't call for a vote on the filibuster itself. So they have said that they wouldn't allow it to happen, but he hasn't made them demonstrate that. The most evidence that we have right now for why this is waiting is the Biden White House, which has shown an enormous amount of interest in getting the infrastructure bills passed and virtually none in getting voting rights protected. And as I said, there was an article, it was about a week or 10 days ago, where White House aides were quoted as saying that they thought they could out-organize the voting rights laws that were being passed. There's been a huge blowback to that, but Biden, when in the primaries and in the election, he ran on his ability to build bridges and to get things done in bipartisan fashion, which is just, there's no way you can do that when the Republicans are the ones who are attacking the right to vote. They're literally attacking elections full on, January 6th style, without the, hordes overrunning the Capitol. But I mean, everything else is still in place. They're continuing to, promulgate the big lie. They're continuing to use that supposed voter fraud that doesn't exist to put in place laws that are going to make it harder for people, especially people of color, to vote. And that's why this is being referred to as Jim Crow 2.0. Yeah, Linda. Yeah.
When I try to call the White House, I get a recording that they're not accepting phone calls or messages. So
Yes,
does anyone
exactly.
have a number where they actually pick up? You can email through a web page, but
Yes.
I would feel
Yeah.
better because I'm talking to someone at Feinstein's and I'm talking to someone at Padilla's, but
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the White House. So if you have that resource, I would appreciate it. I would share it with folks I know.
Yeah, we can keep looking. I haven't found it either. We've been running into the same problem, and then they refer you to their comment form basically on their website. We use ResistBot as well, and I'll share both of those with everybody on the call in just a few minutes. But yeah, it's kind of astounding to me that the president of the United States isn't picking up his phone. I don't mean he should do it personally, but there's nobody there doing that. And that to me is unusual and unfortunate, I guess, is a polite way to say it. Anybody else have questions?
Tom, this is Gloria.
Yeah, hey, Gloria.
I understand that there's two other senators, King, who is an independent, and Coons, who is a Democrat. They're also against this For the People Act. I just read that in the last couple of days.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where they stand on the act itself. I know Coons, and I can't remember his counterpart in Delaware, are also problematic as far as the filibuster is concerned. I'm not sure exactly where King stands on the filibuster. So we've got both of these issues intertwined, right? We've got the For the People Act and protecting voting rights. And then we've also got the fact that right now there's a veto in place Democrats haven't removed because they haven't gotten rid of the filibuster. So you've got some folks that might be willing to pass the For the People Act, but are getting cold feet or have cold feet about the filibuster. There may be some folks who have concerns about parts of the For the People Act. It's important to know that what the filibuster does is it stops all progress on a bill at all. You can't even start doing anything. It basically stops it dead in its tracks. It doesn't get any kind of a vote whatsoever, as long as the filibuster veto is used. And so the process of taking the act and deciding what's actually going to be in it, that doesn't get to happen either. So there would need to be discussions about, do we keep everything in the act the way it was written by the House? Do we amend it in some way that would make it more palatable to certain senators? If we do that, does it still, have enough teeth to do what we need it to do? So all of those things are kind of in play. Yeah.
The Senator Coons supports the For the People Act. I haven't had a chance to check on Senator King, but Senator Coons supports the For the People Act. And I'll do a quick fact check on Senator King.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and it's really, I mean, those of you who've been on these calls, some of you may not have been, so maybe it would be new to you. To everybody else, this is, I've been flogging this for a long time, but it's absolutely insane that the Senate is keeping the filibuster. The Democrats in the Senate are keeping the filibuster. It just hands a direct veto to Mitch McConnell. That's all it does. The idea which they'll float from time to time, and even Biden, is wary of getting rid of the filibuster. The excuse that we're given by Democrats is that if we don't keep it, we won't be able to use it when the Republicans are in power. Well, if you think for a New York minute that Josh Hawley, as head of the Senate, or whoever it might be, Ted Cruz, because it's not going to be Mitch McConnell forever, although Mitch would do this too, that they are going to let the Democrats stop anything that they want to do by keeping in place a rule that they have to obey. I mean, ask yourself, is there any rule that Republicans have obeyed in the last 5 years that inconvenienced them in any significant way? They don't do that. They don't. The whole problem with the Republican Party right now is that they don't play by the rules, and they're using the rules to break the rules. That's what they're doing. And the degree of delusion that somebody would need to have to believe that, if you're nice to them, then they're going to continue to be nice to you. When after January 6th, you've got to be kidding me. It's just, it beggars the imagination, but we've actually got Democratic senators and a Democratic president who are still living in that strange world. So,
So Angus King
Ezra
also
Levin, who
supports the
co-founded the-
Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act. Now, both Manchin and Sinema and King and Coons may not support the acts as currently written, and they may not support getting rid of the filibuster, but they do support the Voting Rights acts, particularly everything that allows people to vote. So just keep that in mind as pressure points.
Yeah. So the filibuster is a big part of the problem.
Yes.
And it's going to continue to be a big part of the problem for every other thing the Democrats want to pass, which, right to choose, protection from gun violence, you name it, immigration, anything Democrats want to pass. They're handing a veto over to Mitch McConnell. This is not something where we should be blaming Republicans, although they're the opposition here. This is something Democrats currently are doing to themselves, and it's not acceptable. Ezra Levin said a month or so ago, he kind of boiled indivisible down to one sentence. For me, this is that one sentence, which is elected officials don't do what their constituents want unless their constituents make them do it. And every once in a while they do, but most of the time they don't. So why is indivisible here? Indivisible here is here specifically to make them do it. That's what we're for, which means we have to flood them with calls. That's
Tom,
the thing.
Tom,
Yeah, Jane.
this is Jane. I had heard that there are ways to do kind of different techniques with the filibuster in order to try to get things through. Could that be something that could work?
Yes. Yeah. And just to be clear, when we're asking people to call for getting rid of the filibuster, we're doing it for two reasons. One is it's a really simple message. And, rather than teaching people, here are the 5 different things that could be done to the filibuster, and I want you to call your senator and tell all 5 things.
Right.
It's easier to say, I want you to get rid of the filibuster, because really that's the ideal. So that's the other reason. It's a cleaner, more sensible thing to do. There's really, the filibusters, it's like an appendage that it just gets in your way and causes dysfunction. There's no benefit that accrues to it. But there are other things that could happen. So Manchin has said, well, I think it would be better if, people were made to actually stand there and keep talking, which is the way that the filibuster used to work. That might actually work. I mean, if you had to put somebody on the floor of the Senate, you all know that, these senators are, most of them are at least at the median age of this group, if not a lot older. And the idea of staying up all night for these guys night after night is going to wear thin. It's going to wear thin pretty quickly. So that's one idea. There are a bunch of other ideas for changing the number of people that would be required, being able to take a vote for people to break a deadlocking or veto on something. There are a lot of different ways to amend the filibuster that would keep it in place for people who want to save face, but would essentially keep it from being just a wholesale veto. There are also folks who have said, well, we've carved out exceptions for other things. So we're going to talk in a minute about a reconciliation bill. Reconciliation bill is basically a way of going around the filibuster for financial purposes. For things that affect the federal budget, they have the Byrd rule, named after Senator Robert Byrd, that allows you to not have to deal with a filibuster in those cases. They just made up a rule that said, well, for some things, we don't want to have a filibuster. Well, people are saying, so how about we just don't have a filibuster for voting rights? You want to keep the filibuster for everything else? Great, but not for voting rights. So there are a number of ways that we could get around it. I think that's the answer there. Yeah, Susan.
I'm hoping that after today, when the bill for the infrastructure got through, or the first bill for the infrastructure got through the Senate, that there might be a game going on in the back of Democrats' minds and Biden's minds about wanting to walk the Republicans through to get that passed before they regroup and reform around the filibuster changes, et cetera, and get the voting stuff back as a priority. Do you see any possibility there?
I think it's, the first thing is, I think there are a lot of guessing. A lot of folks are doing a lot of guessing about what kind of games are being played, like what's happening that we can see and what's happening that we can't see. I don't I mean, one theory about this is that McConnell actually is very happy to be passing the infrastructure bill because it's demonstrating to the filibuster holdouts on the Democrat side that bipartisanship works, and they should never get rid of the filibuster because, hey, look, we worked with you guys. Of course you can work with us. We're, friendly, cuddly Republicans. And he's willing to pass this because it's basically a giveaway to the Republicans anyway, which we'll show you in a minute. So there's, he doesn't have any real objections to this bill. They can say, look, we help people with infrastructure too. And by the way, we're never going to let you do anything else for the rest of your presidency. Thank you very much. And Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are on my team now. So by the way, you're not going to win any elections next year. And I'm sorry that you were napping when, I don't mean that literally, but that you were paying attention to the infrastructure bills instead, because that's what I really had going on. Some folks are, that's their theory. Others are saying Biden really had to do this because Manchin wasn't going to budge until he made some kind of good faith effort at bipartisanship. So who knows? Either way, we need to keep putting the pressure on our senators in particular. We need to keep calling because they actually pay attention to calls. They tally the calls. They usually report those out every morning. The senators listen. A few calls will get their attention. A lot of calls will really get their attention. And they use that as a way to gauge public opinion in a kind of rough way. And so the more calls that we can get directed towards them, the better. If they're already working on the issue, it gives them leverage when they're talking to other senators. If they're not really paying attention to it, it might make them pay attention to it and divert their attention onto something that we think is more important. Of course, calls matter and actions matter too. Pictured here are the House Democrats from the Texas state legislature who left Texas so that they couldn't restrict the vote in Texas, at least while they're gone, because they don't have a quorum. The Greg Abbott and the Texas Republicans are trying to get around that right now, but they got 10 guys out because of COVID. So Abbott's kind of shooting himself in the boot there. But this is an example of an action that folks can take, and the Texas Democrats from the legislature not only left Texas, they went to Washington, D.C. to implore the Senate to act, which they obviously haven't done yet. In the lower right-hand corner are Black activists who are saying, you have to protect our right to vote. It's not okay for you to go on recess. And this shows them at Reagan National Airport, basically saying, we don't want senators to use this airport to leave. We want you to stay right where you are and don't go on recess. And do protect our right to vote. And of course, the other picture is of Cori Bush, not about voting rights, about extending the moratorium. But Cori got it done after the Biden White House dumped the news on Nancy Pelosi's lap within 24 hours that, by the way, they weren't going to extend the moratorium. And Pelosi then didn't blame it on the White House, but held basically a show vote of unanimous consent, tried to blame it on the Republicans, which was ridiculous because they weren't going to vote for it anyway. Even though she had a bill that Maxine Waters had written, she had a bill ready, she could have brought it up for a vote, but she knew that there weren't enough Democrats to get it passed. So Cori Bush went and slept out on the steps of the Capitol for 4 or 5 days and said, I'm not going to let this go. You guys can go on recess, but I'm not going to let this issue go. I'm going to be the public face of this until you do the right thing. And darned if she didn't get the White House to turn around and finally do the right thing. I think they went on recess on Friday. It was probably Monday that the White House finally caved and said, oh, I guess maybe there's something we can do after all, because the harsh glare of bad publicity was not a good look for the Biden White House. That's why they did it. So, we need to know over the course of the next month plus that there may be actions that we and others need to take as well to bring that harsh glare directly onto Biden and our Senate Democrats. If you prefer to send a message instead of calling, you can use ResistBot, which is actually easier, Linda, than filling out the contact form at the White House. And I'm going to stop sharing and start resharing here for a second, because folks get a little bit confused when I say, well, you can just go and use ResistBot. It's kind of like, what the heck is that? And how would I go about doing that? And what it is, it started out as a texting program. Like you can text on your phone to, I think it's 50010, something like that. But I'm going to share my screen here because there are a couple of other ways that you can get into ResistBot as well. If you're a Facebook user, and I'm in Facebook right now, Indivisible Sonoma County, you can go, and if you go to the upper right-hand corner, there's a Facebook Messenger tab here. This little, I don't even know what it is. Looks like a little lightning bolt or something. You can go to Messenger
It's a
and you can
tilde.
search.
It's a tilde.
It is. You're right. You're right. It's pretty stylized though. It's kind of like a tilde, made for a superhero's costume, I think. But and if you search for the word ResistBot, you can choose ResistBot, and you're going to get a little message board like this. And if you're a brand new user to ResistBot, it's going to say, "Oh, hi, who are you?" And it'll ask you your name and your address and your zip code. I don't think it asks much more than that. It needs your address and zip code because what it does is kind of nifty. It will figure out who your representatives are, from your mayor and your city council all the way up to the president of the United States. So once you're in there and you want to send a message, it will just do it for you. And what it does is it formats an email with your constituent information and formats it as a letter that they email to somebody. So if I say president, and we're in the lower right-hand corner here, and hit enter, it's going to come back and say, oh, well, now it's coming back and saying, you know what, I'm really busy and I can't take your message right now. So that's not really helpful. But normally what it would do is I would be able to type out whatever I want to say to Joe and the White House, and then hit enter, and I'd type out done and hit enter, and then it would say, is this what you want to send? And I would say yes. If instead you're on Twitter, you can go to messages in Twitter, the envelope icon there, and lo and behold, @ResistBot can be messaged from there too. And so if we try the president again in Twitter, see if it's still on fire. Nope, send as many texts as you need to compose. And we can say, you can't organize gerrymandering. Please work with the Senate Democrats to pass the For the People Act now. And done, Joe. That's what I need you to know. And it's going to come back and say, is this what you want? And I'm going to say send, and it's off and running. So that's ResistBot. It's a pretty handy tool. Any questions about that? Yeah.
Could you put up the number to text, the very first thing you had? Because I didn't get to take
Yes.
a screenshot of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me go back to that so that you've got it in front of you, and we will pick it back up. There we go. Huh. And it's not letting me share my screen, so let me try that one more time.
50409.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. Now you should have that again. Is that right? So,
There's
Yes.
a line right now.
yes, right. That was what we got the first time around. And so you can just use that on your phone. I think it's really handy because I spend a fair amount of time on Twitter, and you can run across some news and find that you're irritated by something, or you feel like they need to do something, and it's instant gratification. You could go right to the messages part of it and say, doggone it, stop attacking rooftop solar, or whatever it might be. So here's what I'd like us to do. I said this was going to be an action-oriented meeting. And here's a sample call script, but you can use your own words. Basically, what we need President Biden to do is to make passing the For the People Act his top priority, not something second or third. It needs to be something that he really focuses on. They've held over 300 meetings with different congressional representatives to try to get infrastructure moving. And they just haven't put the same level of effort in on protecting voting rights, and we need that to change. He needs to work to unite Senate Democrats to pass the bill by any means possible. And Linda, to your point, this is the web address for the White House, so you should be able to copy and paste that. Or you can type it out if you can open that in your browser. And barring that, you can use ResistBot, and I'd encourage you to take a minute now and use one or the other to send Joe a message. So we've got, how many people do we have on the call? 19 people on the call. Send Joe a message right now, as I just did, and let him know that it's time to make this a priority. And then when you've done that, give us a thumbs up or something so that we know you've completed it, and we'll go on to our next action.
I use this every single day,
Yeah,
every day.
that's great. Yeah, I try to think of it like brushing my teeth. I don't know if that metaphor works for you, but.
Yep.
So let me go to our next call person, who is Senator Feinstein. And she's been back and forth on this stuff, but we finally, a few weeks ago, got her staff to kind of straighten things out. And she released a statement saying, no, I absolutely believe that voting rights are critical and we must get this passed and we have to find a way to get it done. She didn't explicitly say, get rid of the filibuster, but she did say, we must find a way to get this done. So I'd encourage you now, and again, in your own words, here I'm saying, we're out of time. I need her to place all of her effort on getting these two pieces of legislation passed now. Recess can wait. Saving our democracy can't. So in your own words, go ahead and either call, if you call now, you're going to get a voicemail. You should get a voicemail. You can just leave a message. And the main thing is, got to pass the For the People Act, and we've got to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And I'm going to leave a message for her also using ResistBot while you're doing that. Is anybody using the phone for that? And if
I
so,
am. I'm using the phone.
yeah. And are you able to get through?
Yeah, at first it said they were busy, but then they just popped you into it.
Oh, good. Okay. We always try to keep track of that because sometimes their phone lines can get kind of jumbled.
Yeah.
And are folks ready for me to move to our next
I'm
senator? So let's move to Padilla. The really good news is that Senator Padilla not only supports both voting rights acts and getting rid of the filibuster, he is vocal about it. He is out there talking about it every day. He even filmed a piece for the Deadline for Democracy and put that out there. He is an advocate for getting this done. And so in calling him, the purpose is to say, absolutely, yes, we've got your back and keep going. And double down on this. And we don't have, unfortunately, a San Francisco phone line for him for some reason. Again, if you're using ResistBot, you can use that as well.
Tom,
Yeah.
I called that number 224-3533 and got the fax.
It's 3553.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's okay.
A learning disability, I guess.
Nah, it's phone numbers, especially when we're doing a lot of this. There's a reason that they have auto dial and tools for phone banking that don't rely on you typing everything out with your fingers. Your screen may look a little bit different here for a second because I want to get a couple of links for you that I'm going to put in the chat. While you're making that call. Okie doke. Great. And were people able to get through to Padilla? Seen some nods. Okay, great. So it's really important to keep making these calls, even though they're on recess. My calls are probably going to change to you should never have come home until you've gotten this done. I'm not above being kind of in the face about this stuff. Come back. Come back when you've done what you're supposed to do. Otherwise, head back to DC and get back to work. Come on. I should say, and just to be correct about this, when the Senate is on recess, it doesn't just mean that they're on vacation. It means that they're back in district doing things in district as well. Some of them may be vacation. That's not all they do when they come back.
Sometimes
However,
they go to Moscow.
yes, some of them do. Yeah, just to report in, I think. So calling is really important, and I'd encourage you to keep doing that and to look at our phone scripts going forward. And we publish those every week. There are other things, though, that also can be done. So here's one of them. There's going to be a march on, let's see, it's August 28th. They're going to be marching in Washington, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Phoenix, and other cities across America. I've put the link to the march in your chat, so you can pull that up and look for more information. I think there's a link to be able to register for a march as well, if that's something that you can join in, or if you know somebody in one of those cities who could join in. There is phone banking that you can do. So you can call our senators, which is really important, especially Feinstein. I think it's really important right now to call Biden. He needs to get the message that the filibuster has to go and voting rights really can't be out organized. But you can also call voters in states like West Virginia or Arizona who have recalcitrant senators and talk to voters there to get them to call their senators. So it's another way to increase the pressure. And that link also is in your chat. And then there's a Democracy Can't Wait rally happening after this one in about 12 minutes or so, that's hosted by Indivisible East Bay. And they're going to have speakers, and their rally is going to go on for like an hour and a half tonight, starting at 7. So, when we wind down here, if you're not already fired up enough, I'd encourage you to go there because I think they're going to have a good lineup of speakers. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So let me move us on to a couple of other things, because absolutely voting rights are the most important thing. If democracy dies, as we said in a letter, a group letter from indivisibles across the country, actually, if democracy dies, everything else is going to fail. You know, this was our plea to Biden. You have to save democracy. You have to save our ability to have free and fair elections, because Jim Crow really works. I mean, you know, for 80 years, Black Americans were denied the right to vote. That's how it works. We can't afford to go there again. You know, obviously for people of color, but it's going to be people of color, but it also means basically all Democrats. It's going to ensconce Republican rule for decades, if not longer. However, there is the infrastructure bill that Biden has been working so diligently on, and others, and wanted to talk just briefly about that. Here's the original bipartisan bill, right? This is what was supposed to be in the bipartisan bill. This is what they started out talking about, $2.6 trillion. And what they ended up with was this. So this is what happens with working with Republicans to come up with a solution, is you trade away an awful lot of stuff just so you can say you got something done with the Republicans. It's a very, very high price to pay. If it means that Joe Manchin's going to do some other important stuff, then it might be worth it. But look at the cost that this imposed, because if Democrats had had the ability to just vote 50 people and get it done, it would have been the previous pie chart. So let's look a little bit at the climate piece of this. So David Roberts, who's a climate journalist and expert, says that Congress is working on what's likely to be its last big shot at climate change policy for a decade or more. Hopefully that won't be true, but it might well be if, for example, we lose a house somewhere, you know, manage to not get decimated entirely, but don't have complete control of trifecta of Congress. This may be our one chance for the next 10 years or so. And if you've been following any of the climate news, 10 years is longer than we actually have. So what he's really saying is for the next 10 years, might as well be eternity. If things go well, however, the legislation will include a clean energy standard and clean energy tax credits, which together would revolutionize the US electricity system. If they don't go well, basically we're screwed. And he's encouraging us to look at what's on the menu. In other words, there are two things that are already in the bill that would be transformational. There may be other things, if you're strongly interested in climate, there may be other things that you really wish were there. But if they're not there already, the chances of getting them into the bill and being transformational, it's just not very good. So there are two things that are immensely important, and we really need to focus on them. The first is the clean energy standard. What that is, and it gets acronymed into CES by a lot of folks, is it's effectively policies that would reduce electricity sector greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2030. The Biden plan is actually 100% by 2035, but a reconciliation bill, as we mentioned before, it's an end around on the filibuster by going through things that affect the federal budget. And by the arcane rules that they've set up, it can only have a 10-year horizon, which is why it's 2030 and not 2035. It's technically not a clean energy standard. It's actually a clean electricity payment program. The reason for that is that you can't use a reconciliation bill for a standard. You can use it, however, for a payment program, which is incentivizing the same thing. It's getting 80% decarbonization by 2030, which Robert says is achievable, but it's still incredibly ambitious. Basically, climate in a nutshell is we have to stop burning fossil fuels to power ourselves. We have to stop burning things. We have to start using renewables to survive. And the faster we do that, the less pain. And the longer we take, or the more we pretend to be moderate about it, the more pain. It's really that simple. The other piece of the puzzle is clean energy tax credits. That's boosted and expanded clean energy tax credits, not only for wind and solar, but for things like energy storage, hydrogen, carbon capture, and other clean energy technologies. And lo and behold, our very own Mike Thompson has actually introduced a piece of legislation through House Ways and Means. The subcommittee that he chairs has introduced his very own Green Act, which is basically ways to use the tax code to advantage clean energy tax credits. So sometimes we're not always 100% aligned with Mike, but in this case, we've got Mike really lined up for tax credits, which is a wonderful thing. However, these are all in the reconciliation bill, and they have to stay in the reconciliation bill for them to be useful. So we really need right now to be fighting for them, because it's all being decided right now. It's really time for us to kind of, band together with everybody that we know that's, doesn't like wildfires, isn't crazy about flooding, would prefer to see the world not asphyxiate in, temperatures that aren't bearable for human life, things like that. To band together and to be talking to our senators and our congressmen about this and saying it's critical that the standard and the tax credits have to survive negotiations. If they don't, I don't want you to pass this bill. I want you to not pass the bill at all. You have to be willing to throw down the gauntlet on this and hold firm. And speaking of holding firm, the other kind of tension point on this is what Republicans obviously are hoping for is that the bipartisan infrastructure bill is the only infrastructure bill that Congress passes. That's what they would like to see. Chop it down to size, please your fossil fuel overlords, and make sure that that's the only thing that gets passed, because maybe you can peel off a couple of Democrats in the Senate to stop the reconciliation bill from going forward. Or you can try to really just eviscerate it the way they did with the bipartisan bill. However, the good news is that the Progressive Caucus in the House is basically putting Speaker Pelosi on notice and saying, if you don't send us both the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan bill together, it's no deal. We're not going there. Pelosi has also said as much, but it's really helpful to have 93-member caucus saying, we're not going to do it. You can't sneak a bipartisan bill by us and then expect us to, be willing to let the other bill, which is the actual priority for all of us, just go by the wayside. So it's important, no climate, no deal. It's also really important that these bills have to go through the House together, or they shouldn't go through at all. And that sounds pretty desperate, but the stuff that's in this bill, it's that desperate. If it doesn't get done, not only are Democrats' electoral chances toast, but our climate and people's social well-being are going to be incredibly damaged as well. Let me pause and ask if you have questions about either the infrastructure bills or what we need to do about these. Hearing none, let me move to our third and final act of this play of actions, which is this guy right here, who is being attacked by Republicans who see an opportunity, because California's got the recall possibility, which is basically, if you have enough money, you can pay people to go out and get signatures to put somebody on the ballot for recall. It will cost millions and millions of dollars to the state. But if you've got a lot of money and you're not paying for that election, what do you really care? It's a way to test the waters and see if maybe you can get this guy out and replace him with a Republican who would never win a general election in the state of California. Absolutely no way would ever win a general election. So it's really critical. We had thought, well, this is going to be a slam dunk. But the problem is, it's very easy to get Republicans riled up, especially when you've got Fox News and stuff like that working for you. And they're going to turn out in droves because they don't like Newsom, because they don't like wearing masks. They don't like getting vaccinated. They admire people like DeSantis and Abbott, who are essentially murdering their constituents right now by prohibiting them from being safe. And Republicans are going to turn out for this election. It's really critical that Democrats do the same. If Democrats turn out, Newsom's fine and we can keep going. If they don't, there's a real danger that somebody getting 20% of the vote who's a crackpot Republican is going to be our governor for a while. And furthermore, if that were to happen and say Dianne Feinstein is physically unable to continue, it's the governor who appoints the next senator. As you've seen when Harris stepped down, it was Governor Newsom who appointed her to, or appointed Padilla to be her replacement. So it's absolutely critical, not only that we vote no on the recall, also that we don't make any choice at all for the, who would you want if Newsom is recalled? Because that, my understanding is, that will actually be treated as a vote to recall him. So it's critical to leave the second piece blank. There's a lot of work and phone banking that's going on.
That briefly, Tom.
Yeah.
If we vote no and we pick a choice, it only confuses everything. It won't negate your no vote, but I don't really, I didn't get a clear answer from the clerk's office how it will be counted. But so it could end up tossing out the no vote, but it could just make everybody crazy.
Yes. Yeah.
So Newsom's people are saying just don't vote on the second question. And that's what I would say to do anyway, because there's nobody in column 2 that we would want to replace Newsom. We want people to pick column 1 and say no. And it's a hard one for Democrats because Democrats are better voting yes. They like voting in an affirmative way.
Yeah.
So our task as influencers, and everybody here on this call is somebody who's able to influence other people, is to get other people to vote.
Yeah, turn out. And I would say use that same influence to get people to call for the other issues that we've put here. But it's really critical over the next few weeks that we get people voting no. Everybody's going to have a mail-in ballot. They can, as soon as they get their ballots, they can fill them out and send them in. But friends and family, anybody that you run across, people in the grocery store, they just need to vote no on this recall because it's basically just a Republican power grab. That's what it is.
You can remind people that it's costing the state of California nearly $250 million. That the ballot doesn't cost the voter a penny. They just mail it back in. It's prepaid mailing, so they don't have to put a stamp on it. There's drop boxes all over the county. In the next day or so, I'm going to be sending out a newsletter, and that'll include a map of where all the drop boxes are. Those drop boxes will be available on the 17th for everybody who wants to drop off their ballot already finished. You can vote in person at the clerk's office. Everything's done to make it easy to vote. And there's just no reason to even do the research on the people who are running against Newsom. But every one of them is running against Newsom, and some of them are really funny and some of them are really scary. And if there's any question about it, we should be talking about the scary ones. The ones who are anti-masking, anti-vaccination, absolutely trying to make California into something that looks a lot more like Texas and Florida right now.
Yeah, thanks. Any last minute questions? Really appreciate all of you being on this call. Would encourage you to reach out to your friends and share this information with them. It's really critical that we keep putting pressure on and that we keep Newsom in office so that we can keep California steering straight and Saber, to your point, also just be healthy. I mean, it's the last thing we would want. Yeah.
Tom, I'm having a terrible time trying to email Biden. It's not taking it.
Hmm.
Would you?
Is
put
that on
up
his
the-
website?
Yeah, it's on
Yeah.
the, no,
Jeez.
it's not going to his website. It was just doing it on my phone.
Yeah.
www.whitehouse.gov/contact.
Yeah. Yeah,
No, it
exactly.
won't take it.
I'll see if I can find something and send it to you via email, Jane. But
Okay.
yeah, I wish, you know, it
It's
would be nice if
terrible.
we could just call and say pass the For the People Act instead of call and say fix your phone line. And by the way,
Yeah, it's just awful. I mean, Padilla is great. You call him, you get a voice, you get him on the phone, you leave a
Yeah.
message and it's done. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, if you would do that
Exactly.
because my message is ready to send.
yes. Okay, no, I will. And once again, in the chat is the Indivisible East Bay event. If you, still haven't had enough and you want to get fired up, they're starting right about now. So thanks for joining us. And we'll keep sending out messages and let you know the status of where things are. And let's get this done.
Somebody,
Make it happen.
oh, is he saying goodbye or is he raising his hand? I guess he's,
Yeah, I think it's, hail and farewell. So
okay.
thanks so much, everybody. See you soon.